It wasn't the place of Yale, but the administration to tell its students what they should and should not wear, and that actually, if you have a costume, it might actually strike up a conversation. Going through that just kind of made me hate the neighborhood, hate my neighbors in particular. So it took me like I would get triggered for a couple of years anytime I'd have to go back, even just to the city, even if I didn't have to go back to Brooklyn. It would just bring back all these just terrible, terrible memories. And that was like my go-to restaurant for when I was single. It was my go-to restaurant when we got married. We learned of the sexes of our sons at this restaurant. Like we opened the envelope for my wife's OBGYN to find out what we were having. There was just so many just incredibly great memories there. We've been out in New Jersey for about 4 years, and we have a house, and we have a backyard, and our basement is bigger than what our one-bedroom apartment was. So just the the size of the house is just immense compared to where we were living.
Hi, everybody. I'm honored today. It's right before Christmas, and it's the most wonderful day of the year because I have Lou Perez with me. He's often at the Lou Perez, so I, fondly call him the or the. And he's a great mind and a great comedian, and I suppose that oftentimes goes together. And we're often, enthralled to his glee and merriment. So merriment is a part of the season. Merriment Christmas, I think they call it, or Merry Christmas for short.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what kind of joy and frivolity can you bring into my otherwise dull life?
Well, I have to say, we're only a few days before Christmas, and we're recording this on the shortest day of the year. So whatever joy I can bring you, it's going to be so short-lived.
Yeah, we better do it quick. I wonder if it's like when they say it's the shortest day of the year, do they mean like in the sense of absorbing time, which is a relative thing? They have this theory of relativity. I think we can spend a little bit of time talking about that. But time itself expands, especially when you're going fast. So when you're going fast, the day feels short. You're feeling short. That makes you a small person.
It all comes together in the end. Yeah. I've had a few Sundays. I would say like the last probably 3 Sundays where it's felt like forever. And unfortunately, they're winter Sundays where you don't want them to feel like forever. Summer Sundays are great. Summer Sundays, there's nothing like, you check your watch and you're like, it's only 11. This is awesome. Then you do some more fun stuff and you check, you're like, it's only 2:30. And then at some point it's 9 o'clock and you're like, where did the day go?
Yeah. I have these moments of, I suppose, pre-nostalgia in the summer, like when the spring's coming around, the flowers are, this color, the vivid stuff that you don't really get and see. I have this concept that black and brown, I'm not talking about skin color, but kind of as you look around you in the woods and whatnot, there's kind of the color spectrum, and those signify death in a way. This kind of coloration you get early in the spring, the bright blues and whatnot, reds of flowers, it would attract life, because that's the sex cycle for bees and the plants themselves. So this kind of plumage that all the animals use for mating is kind of just an incredible splash. And as as that time goes around, the days are long and they're getting longer. I have this pre-nostalgia thing. I feel like I'm going through it. It's like, it's going to be winter. And, this kind of ability to enjoy it, but also feel bittersweet. I think that is nostalgia, which I think, I forget what the nos part is, but algia, like analgesic, is pain. And so you have this kind of pain of being alive and enjoying something, but having yourself outside of it at the same point. That's a good comedy topic, I think, right there.
Oh, I think so. Well, I was also thinking like, so I'm in New Jersey and you're in Massachusetts. So we basically have, similar weather, and we kind of go through the same exact thing. Like we have winters here. it's today is the first day of winter, but meanwhile, where I've been, it has been so bitterly cold. It's been like 12 degrees some days and all. It's just been awful. And I was just thinking about when I lived in California, talk about kind of like a hedonistic weather pattern there where it's just beautiful every single day of the year. I mean, it's basically an orgy of the kind of weather that you would want to have, I guess, during an orgy, and with the occasional wildfire and all that. But it's like you really don't. I think you experience time differently there. And I remember when we were out there, my wife to be and I were out there for a couple of years, and then we moved back to Brooklyn. And there was this one day we were by Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is a really great development that they put up in Brooklyn. And we were about to cross the street, and I turned to her, and it was almost like a movie moment. I turned to her and I said, "I don't remember living in LA." And she said, "Neither do I." And we had only been back for a couple of weeks, but it was sort of that it was like we were just in a different space time in a way,
Yeah,
that it didn't even happen.
I know. We had my wife and I. We had our kind of long courtship. We were together living in sin, and the sin was interesting until we got married 7 years after we met, and that was like the family phase. But the earlier part, she was an artist, and I'm a physician, so she technically metaphysician, and I was also painting. I was like doing art painting, and I saw this schedule. So I had my on days and off days. And I'd really like 14-hour days working, and then I have these other days, and for some reason that was the thing. I haven't really been painting much since, but I went through this active phase, and I built out like a factory into loft apartments, and we had parties and this and that. It's just kind of like another world. It's interesting because if people, not that anyone wants to hear about loft living per se, but here we are, and this was like the envious. There's like a loft of envy. The guy from Jay Giles' band, Peter Wolfe, famously known for his story Peter and the Wolf, until he merged as Peter Wolfe. He came by, he wanted to rent it, and so it's kind of like a high demand item. A lot of stories and whatnot. But when we moved to our leafy suburb, as the kids were getting towards, I guess they were already in school, but school age, they kind of wanted different things from what we wanted and needed in our kind of art phase and so forth. But I assume you had a similar thing for domestication. At the very least, I imagine Brooklyn to New Jersey.
Oh yeah, no, totally. We've been out in New Jersey for about 4 years, and we have a house, and we have a backyard, and our basement is bigger than what our one-bedroom apartment was. So just the size of the house is just immense compared to where we were living. And then also just watching our oldest son, he was born in when we were living in Brooklyn, to watch the way that he developed, going from this apartment with no room to a house where he could walk around, was pretty amazing. And then we had our second kid, and for a while, like if anybody read my book, I write about living in Brooklyn Heights for especially during like COVID, and going through that just kind of made me hate the neighborhood, hate my neighbors in particular. So it took me I would get triggered for a couple of years anytime I'd have to go back, even just to the city. Even if I didn't have to go back to Brooklyn, it would just bring back all these just terrible, terrible memories. And then over the past couple of years, I've been going into the city more. And as I go into the city more, there's that pull of like, oh man, you remember when you used to live here? And, all the restaurants and all the fun that you used to have. And in my old neighborhood, our favorite restaurant was this place called Colony on Atlantic Avenue. And I got the notice. I checked their Instagram the other last month, and it turns out that they were closing down after 15 years. So it was about around the same time that I had moved to Brooklyn Heights. That's when this restaurant came about. And that was like my go-to restaurant for when I was single. It was my go-to restaurant when we got married. We learned of the sexes of our sons at this restaurant. Like we opened the envelope for my wife's OBGYN to find out what we were having. There was just so many just incredibly, great memories there. And they were closing at the end of November. So I looked for a time that we could, that we can get reservations. And there was I had the opportunity. I could have gone the last night, I think at like 9:30 p.m., which probably would have been like their last seating, which would have been perfect. That would have been sort of, if you're writing a book, like that's how it would be. But because we have kids and they have school, and we've already called in so many favors for babysitters and all that, we had to settle for a Saturday brunch. So, but we went there. We did the Saturday brunch, and I took a lot of pictures, and it was sort of in that moment after eating there, and it was good. The food was good, but it was the last, check I'd ever pay at Colony. And I looked around, I'm like, wow, this is really the end. Like our neighborhood that I grew to hate and then longed for is no longer there because our favorite restaurant is gone. And it's sort of like, wow, we really turned a page, if historically speaking, in a way.
Yeah, no, there's the not Tom Wolfe, but Thomas Wolfe. You can't go back again. You can't go home again. There's various chapters that close out. That loft space that I had, we had lots of great memories, and we had different video cameras then, so it's not like you don't have any record of it, but it was in hot, the big handheld ones and whatnot. The things are a little bit grainier, and I tried to put them together. But this thing, kind of, we marched through our, not the march through the institutions, which is Marxian, but we marched through the stages of our lives. And, they have various distinctions. I grew up in New York City in the Bronx, and kind of a small rent controlled apartment. We was technically like 1.5 bedrooms, and there were 5 of us. There are 3, guys, 3 kids, and parents. But, over time, my mom, she kind of became a little bit of a hoarder. And after my dad passed away, and it was just tricky, we couldn't really literally go back. It was kind of like, as soon as I went to college, that was kind of it, like you're out, which is fine. But, there's what happens though, is that it kind of plays out in my head anyway, like various scenarios when you can't go back. You wind up having the images and the kind of the recurring of things that were there and people, and you populate. Anyway, so I suppose it's a little bit on the nostalgia theme. I think it's so I don't know, somewhat appropriate at the end of the year. Have all these best of the year, whatnot. But and it's nostalgia is kind of easier because we have social media, which part of its business model is to prod you with your memories. It's actually its memories, but kind of transmogrified onto your own.
It's fun when you brought up Thomas Wolfe. I mean, and then you brought up Tom Wolfe. Over here on my right there, I'm reading a new collection of stories from Tom Wolfe. What's it called? It's called Mauve Gloves and Madmen, Clutter and Vine, which is it's not his best title, I think, for a book, but I only just started it, but I'm only on the I just finished the first chapter in like one of his sketches that he has. And talk about nostalgia. I'm reading his writing, and I get this with Joan Didion as well. I read their writing from a time before I was born, and yet I feel they write so well that I kind of long for it.
Yeah,
it's really I'm really amazed at how powerful their writing is. And I guess it's that new journalism kind of school, Joan Didion and Tom Wolfe and Gay Talese, where it's just I'm in there, and I feel like I know exactly what they're talking about, except I didn't experience any of it.
Yeah, I got to be in the same room as Tom Wolfe once. We were both watching the U.S. Open for squash. His son, he was a Yale, and his son was at Yale, and was a good squash player apparently, and he had kids I think late in life. So he in his white suit was, he was a couple rows away from me. I didn't get the chance to say hi to him, but he's probably my favorite modern author. I have to think about that a little bit. But have you read Bonfire, the Vanities?
Not yet. No.
Okay, so that's so my two favorites probably are Man in Full and Bonfire of the Vanities. And Bonfire of the Vanities is a New York story, and it's really, it's hugely prescient, predictive of what has happened to our cities. Los Angeles, New York, the George Floyd riots. It's kind of based on Al Sharpton, the way he took things over, quite a while ago, with the false
Tawana Brawley and
Tawana Brawley. Very good, thank you. Good memory. Oh, you're good.
Then the Crown Heights. Then there were the riots, and then there was the one guy's.
There's Freddie.
Freddie's radio.
No, it was in Harlem. It's Freddie's F. But it was like a kind of a Harlem at the time didn't have that many like general stores and whatnot, right. and but that and the Jews were there actually. Kind of on a personal note, my grandfather had a store in Harlem back in the day, and you're doing a service there, but it's also at some personal risk. And Freddie's, that'll come to me later, but they basically rioted the place out of existence. They mobbed it, rioted at Al Sharpton's existence, at his insistence against its existence, and a lot of that just played out. I mean, but Tom Wolfe, not Thomas, but Tom Wolfe, had really a remarkable ear. I saw it. It was a couple rows back, and it was attached to his remarkable head. He didn't have quite the remarkable facial hair that you do, but so he had a remarkable ear for language and storytelling, and he's got a kind of a lesser book, I Am Charlotte Simmons, which does the campus madness. But he's so good at this stuff that it resonates. Unfortunately, humans, we have our own template for mischief and misdeeds and whatnot, and that can make you a lot of money. Al Sharpton's still hanging around. We have skinny Al Sharpton. It was fat Al Sharpton back then, or excuse me, what's a nice word for fat?
Plump Al Sharpton, rotund, big,
food enjoying.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. He looks awful. I commented on one of his things recently because I guess he's trying to do some work with Somalia, and I said, "You look like a starving African child." He really does. His head looks misplaced. It looks like a bobblehead, like if you had an Al Sharpton bobblehead. It's just his head on like a toothpick body.
Yeah. Well, it's he made a decision, but he never paid that stuff. He's gotten wealthy, and they had a decision against him, and the I think it was a police officer and kind of somebody like a DA or whatever, that he totally defamed, and that's what his life was, and they just never paid up, and they were never called to account, and there was so much kind of that. It's not really ever stopped. I wrote an article recently on Nicholas Christakis, who he's an MD PhD at my alma mater, Yale, and he just recently wrote Apollo's Arrow, some kind of reconsideration of COVID, whatever. I don't think we necessarily aligned fully on that topic, but he was the victim of this Maoist struggle session in 2015. So that's 10 years ago. So I wrote something kind of on its memory, and because we've had some interactions, I wrote an article about him, his not misdeeds, but misconceptions, I think, fair enough, on COVID. And that was in Brownstone. And then he kind of lambasted me on the platform, X. And he called my words specious, which is a great word. We went over anyway, but the funny thing is he's actually, I think, reasonably open-minded, sort of. I think he's a reasonably good egg, bright guy, and he's actually teaching my Zika stuff in his undergraduate class on public health. And so I've worked on reformulating the Zika microcephaly pandemic, which preceded the COVID one. And anyway, so just to kind of come full circle on it. So I wrote an article to kind of capsulize, my interactions with him, and I'm, really kind of remora on his bigger kind of whale presence. So I don't want to just piggyback on him too much, but he was the total victim, and the Yaleys who did this struggle session against him because his wife had the, I hope you're sitting down. If you remember that, it was the Halloween controversy. His wife, Erica, said that during Halloween, people could wear costumes.
Yeah, it wasn't the place of Yale, the administration to tell its students what they should and should not wear, and that actually, if you have a costume, it might actually strike up a conversation, and someone might say, like, "Hey, you're dressed as X, Y, or Z. Why is that?" Yeah, it was. You're an adult, right? Like that's basically what she was saying.
Yeah, and for me, I kind of, as I was framing this article, I put it in the context of like, well, they call it cultural appropriation. So they all basically, kind of struggle sessioned him in the courtyard of Silliman College, which is a subset of Yale, and there's a great picture of him. He's standing there, kind of like, what just happened? I thought we were here for discourse and concord and accord and debate and whatnot. And pretty much it's brown to black women surrounding him, and they're all kind of finger pointing. And I remember the video from it, and how dare you, basically, like the Greta Thunberg pre Greta, how dare you do this kind of stuff? But dudesses, you're standing in the middle. On the one side is like French Renaissance building, the other side is like English colonial, and you're there to learn ostensibly the Roman, Greek into Roman into Western civilization, and you're there to aspire to a way of learning that is not necessarily natural to you, obviously, because of the way you're acting, and you left whatever circumstances. We're going to stipulate that this is maybe the poorer demographic at Yale, and you want to be in the upper echelon. The whole essence of the liberal arts was for those liberos, for free men, to understand and be able to manage society. And you're there to learn that stuff. And that is, if anything, if nothing else, it's a cultural appropriation. That is what you're there for, is to appropriate and kind of self-infuse the better techniques, And so if you have occasional mockery, because we can't always be serious all the time, and if you have the occasional mockery, well, that's what that is. That's the time to have fun. It's like, but I think the concept of fun would have been just a kind of.
Well, it is its own kind of fun, right? That Maoist, struggle session is a kind of fun, in that you get to scream at and your professor, right? You get to shame them. There was that one girl who's like, "I want your job." She's like, "I want you to lose your job." And when you talk about, and I don't know what the breakdown is as far as income and whatnot at Yale, but my guess is that the black kids who attend Yale, they probably come from really wealthy families as well. I hear that one of the ways that like the Ivies kind of get around this whole their insistence on like diversity is like, okay, well, we need more black kids. All right, we'll get the ambassador from Nigeria's kids to go here. We'll get the I don't know where the Obama children went to school, but basically we'll get the equivalent of the Obamas, two lawyers, mom and dads, to come here. And then when the kids go there, right, the only thing that really they have to set themselves apart is the color of their skin, right, and whatever that history of the United States that they can glom onto.
I think there's a little bit of a mix. I was there back in the Neanderthal, or was it Paleozoic? I forget, whatever, one of those times, and there was a little of both. There were kind of the more inner city black kids that had probably leapfrogged, not on grades but on melanin, and they self-segregated, And so the whole concept was to, diversify the experience. And I think this probably happens now as well. I haven't been in the, dining halls during active student times, but, there was like we had the commons, which I suppose, that we're all there in common, and that's first year. And there was the black table, there was a Puerto Rican table. There was all these kind of things. And clearly the body language was, do not break into this. And so there were people, so we went into these residential colleges after, such as Silliman colleges. So there's not really colleges, they're halls. And you divide up to like 100 kids per class, and that becomes your cohort that you know better than the other kids. So you have like a microcosm, and you see people more, have friendships and whatnot. But even throughout the 4 years that I was together with some, there are some, black, actually women in my year that, barely ever said a word to, or vice versa, and so you go to reunions and you probably say more then than you did back during the college days, because people have somewhat gotten over that, chip on their shoulders and whatnot. Now they're, have jobs as attorneys and professors and whatnot, so you can kind of converse. But it's like during the formative stage there, it wasn't really a diversity at the university. It's kind of funny, numerically, university and diversity go from one uni to two. But you're talking about the fun of the Maoism. I had one of my subheadings, I got to put it out here, in the Christakis thing was the Mao the merrier.
That's nice.
Yeah, so that's got a little Christmas theme.
Well, it's also making me think of Tom Wolfe mowing the flat catchers.
Yes, very good. Oh my God, we should do a Tom Wolfe reading group. I mean, if you I'm sure it's easy enough to find that title, because I love reading Tom Wolfe, and it's a joy.
Something I wanted to ask you. When you're talking about being a doctor and your wife was an artist. I guess it recently came out that the doctor and author Oliver Sacks was full of a lot of bullshit, which is
I didn't write it down, but I knew that at the time. I was reading that stuff, like, what?
Yeah, maybe you could explain. Yeah, could you explain? So Oliver Sacks, who wrote Awakenings, he wrote The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. He wrote An Anthropologist on Mars. I think that was my first intro to him, and then I read his autobiography as well. He wrote these incredible profiles of patients in these psych wards that were incredible, I guess, in more ways than one.
They were out credible. they were just not credible, non-credible. Yeah, no, and the guy's kind of effed in the head, and probably a few other places. He eventually, I mean, he apparently was an awkward guy. He didn't, marry. Eventually he, announced he was gay and took up with somebody. But there's, we've kind of gotten off the thread that, of what normalcy is, and we're not really allowed to discuss it. But, we have this expression in medicine that rare things are rare and common things are common. It's pretty stupid. So like, it's also kind of axiomatic and useful. The expression, when you hear hoofbeats, you should think of horses, not zebras. So kind of in the realm of normalcy, people doing normal things with the way the normal kind of template is for us, instinctually mating, marrying, carrying on family, all that kind of stuff. The people who fall somewhat outside that, it may not just be that. There's this other thing in medicine, which is, if you look it up, I don't know if you can still find it, but I'm not accusing Oliver Sacks of this per se, but it's also kind of in the realm of odd things are odd. There's a thing amongst pediatricians, they talk about kind of whispering, and we got this medical school, it's called FLK, and it's funny looking kids. So when a kid, yeah, I know. When a kid looks funny, you should investigate for other things, because, normalcy groups in normalcy. So when you have, handsome, dashing young lads such as yourself, around, oftentimes it implies, you know, hybridization, that your parents didn't, they weren't from the same village,
Mm.
for the last 1,000 years. So you have less consanguinity, and you're probably, if you have normal features, you're probably healthier, or conversely, if you're unhealthy, you have. So anyway, you get the idea. So these things tend to group. So my point about Oliver Sacks is that, a lot of his oddities of his life should have been a little bit of a harbinger of some other oddities. And I read that stuff. I was a New Yorker reader back then. I used to have a subscription, and the New York Review of Books, and I'm pretty sure he was in both. And certainly the reviews of his books was in the latter. And when that came around, it's like, I prided myself. My big discovery in high school that spurred my own reading, as opposed to assigned reading, was Sherlock Holmes. So it's not necessarily great literature, but they're puzzles, and they're written out puzzles. And I read his stuff; they were the opposite. They were like the complete obfuscation and obscuring of fact into some weird little theory. It's totally the opposite of the it's kind of the raveling of a Sherlock Holmes story, and into some weird conception that he had preconceived. Totally the opposite of intellect and discernment. And yet, the funny thing is that everyone liked it for its oddities, and because it was so weird. And that's the kind of thing that humans seem to be very susceptible for.
Yeah, I've wanted to. I've taught like creative writing classes a long time ago, and I taught like comedy, like sketch writing. And one class that I've wanted to teach. If anybody out there would like to take a class with me, it would be basically turning nonfiction into fiction, and being able to look at, say, like something that just happens in your life, and it's almost interesting, and it's like a little back and forth with a cashier, or some. I'm sure a lot of people have this where they get their comeback line like days later. I think George Costanza has something like that.
That's Voltaire Rousseau. You know about that?
No, I don't.
I'll come back to it. Go on.
Yeah. So it would basically be like, okay, well, here's a real occurrence where if you were telling the story, it's kind of boring to say like, oh, well, you didn't have that comeback in hand at the time, but you had it, however many hours later. But how do you fictionalize it? Well, you give yourself that comeback in that moment, and now what happens? And I wonder, thinking about like Oliver Sacks, it's like, how much of this stuff is like, man, he really wants kind of a perfect universe where he has the answer and he knows exactly what's happening here, and then he kind of bends the truth or outright lies to make it so.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Louis C.K. has this routine on Matt Damon. Have you seen that one?
Oh, wait, is it the one about like Good Will Hunting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, Good Will Hunting. It's like so he's got a line of like about an apple or something like that. But if the guy, so Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote the thing. I don't know if it was one or the other, or both. And of course, he's the janitor, but he's brilliant.
He's
he
the janitor genius. Yeah,
janitor genius, like all the janitors and like all the geniuses who go out to janitoring. And so some guy comes up to him and he's got this great comeback. It's like, if it's about an apple, it's like, I don't know, it's like, how do you like them apples, whatever. But if the guy didn't say exactly the right thing, the comeback doesn't work. But of course he says exactly the right thing so that Matt Damon can have the hero.
Oh yeah. If the guy had said, if he's like, do you like apples? And the guy's like, no. And then Matt Damon's like, all right, well, I got her number. Bye-bye. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So that's when you fictionalize your stuff, it's like, and then you act it, and then you get to be that. That's awesome.
Well, with Oliver Sacks is the one story he has, the man who mistook his wife for a hat, and apparently this guy has mistaken his wife for a number of other things, and it's obviously because something's going on with his brain. But I remember reading that, and I'm like, you could only get away with that once, You could only mistake your wife for a hat once. There's no way she's letting you get away with that bullshit again.
I mistook my ex-wife for a hat again.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
now ex-wife, I mistook for a hat. Promptly.
Your wife's, yeah, it's like, why are you trying to stick your dick in this hat? Then it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a totally other topic. I'm writing this, Substack piece for my own enjoyment, I guess, but maybe some other people might read it. But well, I think it's going to be a Substack piece. I came upon a car in my. I've got a. This is how great my life is. I've got a summer tennis club.
Ooh.
And I used to play squash there in the winter, but my knees are, acting up and whatnot. So I've been playing more tennis. Also, COVID. This is going to be a side story, but under COVID, we play in these squash courts. The ceilings are like 20 feet up. We're adults, mostly, professionals, whatever. We can figure out whether we want to take on risk. And they said, oh, you can't play without a mask. You can't play squash without a mask. And so one day, at that point, tennis was still on. So we have outdoor clay courts seasonally. And I'm a much better squash player proportionally, where I rank. And squash has always been much higher than tennis. But now my squash is getting worse. My tennis is getting better. Anyway, they're kind of merging someplace. But at the time, during COVID times, two guys come out. And they're both MDs, like myself. And I know them. I played squash with both. And they're about my level. And they come out. They're like exhausted. They come outside, which never happens during a squash game. You usually sit on the chairs out there, have a glass of water, go back in. And they're coming out, they're like, like post-coitally and whatever. And so I'm like, wow, that was an incredible match. They're like, match? No, that was the first game. Like, why are you guys so out of breath? Oh, we're wearing masks while we're playing. And so I said, they had a minute there while they're just catching breath. I can talk, and I can talk. So I said, can I just go over the algorithm here? So you guys, they're both like in the 50s at the time. So you guys, are not, you're doing maximum exertion without catching oxygen. What do you think the odds are of having a heart episode as a result of that on the court? Fortunately, each of you know CPR, versus not getting the non-existent thing that you've already both had and been vaccinated for and whatnot. So what do both of them, they don't smoke, they're squash players, they're not going to get COVID, and they've already had it, because we see, hundreds of people, a week, that kind of stuff. Every physician I know got COVID, like early on, they survived, whatnot. They're like, yeah, but that's the rule. Like, okay, well, enjoy. But that's a preface to the fact that I have two clubs. So the other, that's my outdoor club, but I've been doing more tennis because of COVID, because tennis courts, you could play without a mask at a certain point and whatnot. So that was fun for me. I like to, do stuff. And right outside my tennis club the other day, I saw this Subaru Forester, and it had so many bumper stickers on the back, one of those. And they were pretty much inimical. One's make love, not war, but the other one has a pride flag with an AK-47 and marks is under no pretext, which is, will you take our right to fight away? So one is to like kill people for trans rights, and the other one's, excuse my language, but F the police. I didn't quite say it, and that's explicitly there. And the whole gamut of all the kind of Marxian things, get rid of government, but also Medicare for all. It's like So the tie-in, getting back to the medical aspect and Oliver Sacks, is that it reminded me of Memento, where I think Larry, or whatever his name is, Guy Pearce, has this character, and he can't remember anything day by day, so he scrawls things on his forehead, so when he looks in the mirror, he'll remember whatever he said, which I don't think is a real medical condition, and maybe for Oliver Sacks and whatnot. But it seems like this person had to like put all the bumper stickers on his/her car, or yours car, in order to like remember all the things that are the current thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have anything. I don't have any bumper stickers whatsoever. I just I just feel like it's ruining my car, no matter what you would put on it. And it's not like I have like a nice, like a great car or anything like that. I don't know. It just seems like not a good idea. The closest I got, I guess, to a bumper sticker was when I lived in LA. I had a smart car, which is a very tiny car, and I wanted to get a personalized license plate, and I wanted it to be Piglet because it's a small little piglet, and they wouldn't let me do it. They apparently it must have checked one of the boxes for maybe it was offensive or something like that, and I was bummed for like 5 minutes, and then I realized, like, wait a minute, how much am I going to spend to get a personalized license plate in a state where I'm not going to end up living for the rest of my life? I might as well. So they ended up saving me, I think, in the end.
Yeah. Well, so my car, I drive a Tesla, and somebody in that same tennis lot walked by me, like during the Tesla wars of earlier this year. He said he snorted. He's like swastika.
Oh my God.
I'm like, oh my God, you are so clever.
Yeah.
How clever.
Well, what I loved during that whole period was the only people who were painting swastikas in the neighborhood. They weren't Nazis. They were all these quote unquote they were all anti-Nazis, but yet somehow they still were able to spray paint that
Wilford
that
Riley,
symbol of hate. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I have hoax somewhere on here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bud. Well, I mean, the famously, speaking of Nazis, the Reichstag fire was the same thing. It's that you perpetrate upon yourself in order to get gain. So January 6th, I think, was the same kind of thing, where it's aggrandized and it's used for political purposes. So whenever you see the noose hanging, it's not it's not the KKK doing it. It's the guy who wants to be seen as being victimized by the KKK, whatever, in order to like self-promote. So it's kind of it's the opposite of an own goal. It's what would be the word for that? I don't know.
Well, the January 6th one was funny. The noose that that people keep showing, because it's obviously not functional. Yeah, you can't hang anybody from that gallows. This is not gonna. It's not gonna happen. I guess there's the symbolism of it, but for those who were pointing to that and saying like, oh yeah, that's where the politicians were going to be marched to hang. It's like,
I haven't even seen that part.
Much. Yeah.
No, I didn't even see that. That's news to me. So what let's talk about the Lou Perez.
Sure.
What are you working on right now? And you reposted. I mean, we may or may not divert to that post you had about women in relationships, upon which we're both expert.
Yeah, I'm an expert on what women need to do to be in a relationship with me. So if you have no interest in being in a relationship with me, and I'm sure my wife will be fine with that, then don't even listen to this guy. Yeah, don't listen. But yeah, what I've been up to. Well, I actually started co-hosting a new podcast with the Free to Choose network. So it's called Happy Hour Econ, and I'm hosting that with Phil Magness. Yeah. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So it's it's a comedian and an economist walk into a bar, and it's gonna be weekly, and the first one is actually going to be released this week. Sometime before Christmas.
Oh my God, he's my Facebook friend. I don't think we've ever met.
He's brilliant. He's great. And for those of you who don't know Phil Magness, one of the funniest things I think to happen on X or Twitter at the time, I forget which one it was, but Phil was a very big critic of the 1619 Project, to the point where Nicole Hannah Jones would often go back and forth with him. And I think at one point she had blocked him, but was still making comments about him, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the posts, she basically said, who the hell are you? And Phil had to remind her, he's like, well, you actually quoted my work from this book that I wrote. So, yeah. So Phil is one of those. He's an economic historian. He's written a lot of books, and he's one of those guys who always brings receipts to the point where I would be afraid to get into an argument with him about when my birthday is, because I think it's February 26th, but I'm sure Phil could prove it wrong. So.
That's awesome. I carve out some time. I've got my own current favorite economist. He's a friend of mine, Daniel Klein. He's at George Mason, and he invited me to be part of his kind of a professorial book club. And they're doing. It's a really hot book. It's been out. It actually was number 2 on the charts.
Whoa.
Back in the 17th century. It's Cicero's
Okay.
Cicero's Ex Officius, or Cicero, depending if you want to which version of C that you think the Romans did or want to. But everyone's calling him Cicero after the town in Illinois, and it's on duties. And so we read book 1. So apparently I had not heard of this, and so these are all kind of philosophy people and econ professors, whatever. The level of discourse is really quite amazing. When they do a comment, it's like you can hear the citations like riffling off, because they know the papers that talk about the papers that talk about the papers that talk about Cicero, and I'm much more novice on this topic, but my proclivities run towards his basic thesis. He's an Adam Smith expert, so I think the virtuous circle is really the essence of economy and whatnot. Anyway, so Cicero, I don't know where the point of this is per se, but Cicero's work was like, after the Bible, the most printed off thing once Gutenberg got into flow with the printing press. And for centuries, it was the most useful piece of kind of governmental knowledge. And it informed Montesquieu, who informed the American founding fathers. And it's kind of the essence of, kind of the checks and balances we have in politics. I guess it was part of your free to choose thing. But, the free to choose kind of libertarian aspect. But in order to have that, you have to have kind of a stable regime. And Cicero kind of brings about how to get stability. Oddly enough, he got assassinated like within that year he was writing this. And it's a really kind of, I recommended people, and I'll stop talking about it, but it's really quite lucid. I imagine in my mind that he had, like Winston Churchill would write his books with a secretary in tow. He'd go on a walk in the woods, and the secretary wrote everything out. And I imagine that's what Cicero was doing in some form. He was 61 or 62 at the time, and the whole thing flows conversationally. It's really, it's a great piece. And when you're talking about when you're reading the Tom Wolfe, you kind of in that time. Here it is like a time before, not quite before time, but a long time ago. They didn't have iPads back then, and the thing reads like so contemporaneously, like all the pitfalls and pratfalls that we engage in and have as we have our mess of people around. These are pretty standard items, and he has spent a life as a politician and a man successful, not just theorizing. So he wasn't just writing stuff. He was an orator and philosopher, but he had been in political turmoil. And it's kind of, so this basically comes down to on duties, that you have to be in the system in order to do something. You have to, you can't just get stuff. So getting back to that bumper sticker car, all the things are like, screw the government, but Medicare for all. It was kind of more like what you get versus what you put in. And that's the end of my story. I don't have anything else to say about that.
I see a lot of that with when it comes to abolitionists, and nowadays, abolitionists that it deals with prison as abolitionists. They want to get rid of prisons, basically. It's not like the abolitionists of the 17th and 18th century, et cetera. But it is funny to watch people who are outright abolitionists talking about sending people to jail, sending politicians to jail. Or there was this one guy who said he's an abolitionist, and he said if there's this man who's been stalking his mother, and he wants the police to do something about it. He wants them to put him in jail, and it's like, you're an abolitionist. Like, you don't even want the jail, so yeah, it is. It's definitely funny when people's worlds crumble very easily once they're faced with something that they need.
It's all fun and games till somebody gets shot. So
Yeah.
so the one bumper sticker of those that disturbed me the most was the pride flag with the AK-47 superimposed on it with the Marxian phrase, and that's been playing out. This is, I asked ChatGPT if he, she, whatever, would list out the recent kind of trans shooting sprees, and wouldn't, like it's, you can't talk about that. But my understanding, is that there have been a lot of them. The people.
Seems overrepresented
There you go. That's a great
by
word.
how
Wow.
by how many people are in the population. And then there was this recent thing that I think should have a way more should be getting a lot more heat, were these bombings that were thwarted by I guess these I don't know if their nickname is the Trantifa, but Andy No has been writing about it. But they were planning bombings in I think at New Year's events in like L.A. and Philly, I think, and maybe like Chicago, like the big city events. And the question is, for one, that's awful. And obviously, if they are targeting, if the idea is to target on New Year's Eve, you're looking to kill a lot of innocent people.
Oh, I know.
It's
Well, they're not
really
innocent in their view. I think
right.
Andy No is a hugely brave man, and he's frankly the only NGO I want to see funded.
There we go.
But it's like the same people who want to get rid of the Second Amendment. They want it was just a bundle of I kind of think the whole thing is written by an oxymoron. People can't kind of keep conflicting thoughts from self short circuiting. So what's the kind of income stream for you? How do you keep yourself employed? Are you kind of making do with the world of clicks and
Oh no, it's very hard to make do with in the world of clicks. I have this year I was fortunate. I got to go I got to go on the road, do some stand-up comedy, opening for my good friend Scott Thompson. That was great. And now I'm waiting to hear back on a few projects for 2026 that if they come through, then I'll be in a nice place. It'll be a nice end to 2025. So.
All right. So we're kind of getting towards the end of our hour. What controversial thing can you say that will either get us kicked off or more views?
Oh, well, I wrote a piece for Pirate Wires, which is Mike Solana. He has this online magazine called Pirate Wires. They do a lot of stuff on tech, politics, and culture. And I wrote this piece about body cams, police body cams. And the argument that I make is that nothing has hurt the anti-police movement more than the very body cams they demanded police wear.
Oh my God. That's
And
so
so I'm really excited about that. I worked with one of their editors on it, and it's a real piece. Like, I'm used to writing, quote unquote opinion journalism, where I don't need facts. I just need my opinion. What do I think? What do I think about what's happening? But this one, I had to do a lot of research. I know more now about body cams than I ever did. And they're they seem like they seem like they're everywhere, and they kind of are. But they're really new. Like the first pilot programs in the U.S., they came out in 2012, which isn't a very long time ago. And something that you'll find, and part of the argument that I make is if you go on YouTube right now, there are so many YouTube channels devoted to taking police body cam footage and editing them and basically showing you these kind of short stories of people, of what the police have to deal with every single day.
Intense.
So I don't have the exact numbers, but I would venture that for every video of a cop behaving badly that comes to the point of like police brutality, etc., there are hundreds, if not thousands,
No, it's
of
provoked.
videos. Just
I watch the NFL, and whatever, or the NBA, whatever. But oftentimes the referee catches the person who retaliates. Person who's doing all that stuff. So what they're seeing, first of all, the BLM, when they were waiting for anything to use, and the case they picked, like the Michael Brown case in Ferguson, and then George Floyd or whatever, and all the Aubrey and there was just a whole flurry of cases, one after another. And when you spent any time researching these things, they were all like, what would you have done? WWJD. It's really hard, somebody shooting at you, or in the case of Michael Brown, LeBron James, I know, he wasn't in high school to learn stuff, and he didn't go to college, and maybe that's all for the good. But, he did all this, hands up, don't shoot stuff, all this huge narrative. Again, getting back to the lies.
Yeah.
That never happened. That hands up, don't shoot never happened. And Michael Brown was 6'4", and he'd just done, no pun intended, strong armed robbery, and was taking away the gun of the police officer. So that's not a friendly thing. And
no.
And then what do you do? How do you stop that person? What do you do? You're up and close, and it's your life on the line. George Zimmerman with Tavon, the little pictures are all showed him, at communion or something like that. And his own videos, were thug life, and he was doing petty theft and this and that. There's, Mark Twain and others. I mean, I'm sure it's not his own expression, but, lies go around the world before the truth gets its pants on. So you got to wonder, what was the truth doing? Lying in bed like that. I don't know.
Yeah. And there have been a number of recent cases where if it weren't for body cam footage, I could easily see, more cities burning. Awesome. There was one fairly recently. It was a woman. She was a former basketball player at Georgetown University who was having a breakdown. A policeman came to do a wellness check, and when she eventually opens the door, she comes out swinging a blade, cuts this police officer a number of times, and it's right there on tape.
Oh, that was crazy.
And the officer's begging with her, please, like stay back, and he ends her life on camera. It's awful, but the question is like you just asked, what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is like seeing people try to comment and say like, oh, this is racism, et cetera. It's like, well, her holding a knife, I don't think is racism. But also it's like, it's an Asian police officer. So how are you going to square that?
No, that's
a lot of it's just like
that stuff.
The narratives
are
just breaking, they just break down when you actually see what actually happened. I think one of the, just a quick thing, one of the best examples of it, and it's something that doesn't happen a lot, is there was an off-duty police officer who was the victim of kind of like road rage. He gets out of his car to, see what's going on with the guy. The guy had pulled out a gun, and the off-duty officer shot and killed him. That footage wasn't available. The family asked to see that footage because they wanted justice for their loved one. Then the family saw the footage and said, "Oops, okay, you were right to do that. Our family member shouldn't have done that."
We can't have a society, when people just are tribal about stuff. So thank you so much for being with me today. It's a real.
You're part of my tribe. We could be tribal.
I'll watch out for you. Heather MacDonald, I shout out. She's my classmate at Yale, and she wrote on this topic as well. So I appreciate Lou. Sorry about that. There was a little glitch there. So Heather MacDonald's my near classmate at Yale, and she writes brilliantly on this at City Journal. The whole thing about police, the way that distortion of police brutality. So thank you for being with us. People can find you on X at the Lou Perez, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, now it's Lou Perez.
Oh,
so I managed to get rid of the "the."
Oh, that's awesome. So I'm going to have to stop calling you that. All right. Thank you so much, Lou. We hope to have you back soon, and I'm in your debt.